When your brain is in an obsessive loop, maybe recounting those text messages with that guy who's been playing hot and cold, or obsessively thinking over and over again about that girl who is determined to keep you in the friend zone, it's doing a really great job at distracting you from what's actually important. You, your life. How's it going? But seriously, how is it that some people can stay so cool and detached? They begin dating someone and they're not being treated very well, and they step back and they're like, you know what? This isn't right for me. Have a nice life. Or they get dumped and they mourn the relationship for a week or two and they're fine. They go about their life. And then there's other people who attach too quickly, and half-love relationships, breadcrumb relationships, mixed signals, avoidant tendencies. They cause us to obsess and go into a complete life spiral. It's so hard to let go. We hold on so hard to the potential of a relationship, and breakups, sometimes a rejection is what starts the obsession. Well, you could look at it this way. How come some people break their leg, get a prescription for painkillers, and when the prescription runs out, their leg is healed, they go on with their life? But some people break their leg, get a prescription for painkillers, and when the prescription runs out, they begin to spiral. They become full-blown addicts, and they'll do anything, beg, borrow, and steal to get back that feeling that the pills were giving them. They become obsessed and addicted to the one thing that they believe was making their life better. But is their life better? Is life better on poisonous drugs? Is life better in a toxic relationship? The only time we think those scenarios are better is when we perceive our life as something that needs to be escaped. Some people escape with drugs. Some people escape into other people, and that's where limerence comes in. Limerence is an infatuation, it's an obsession with another person who is not giving you a reciprocal relationship. Sometimes there is no actual relationship. Maybe the person has already discarded you, blown you off, and dumped you, but you are still thinking and acting towards them like you are still in a relationship together. Your limerent brain is constantly searching for reasons why you should stay in this relationship, signs that this person really does love you, and someday you'll have the relationship that you have always wanted. And when you are limerent and obsessing over this half-love toxic relationship, it is almost like taking drugs. You know you need to stop. Deep down, you know it's probably not good for you to hold on to this person. But when you have abandonment wounds, the thought of soberly facing the reality of the crappy relationship situation, it's completely overwhelming, and it's really scary. I was telling a friend of mine about the subject for today's video, and they were like, wow, that sounds like a really dark episode. But you know what? It is dark. Limerence is a dark thought pattern that feels good for a little while until the reality of your life, the reality of the situation, comes crashing down around you. You can't ignore it forever. But limerence does a really good job of making sure you can go a really long time before you get to reality. When you are experiencing limerence, it can feel euphoric. It almost does feel like the high of a drug. But in the long run, it can devastate your life because you're wasting your time away, pouring all of your romantic love and energy into this person who is not loving you back. That's why limerence is so dangerous. It can take years of your life from you. I know. Hello friends, my name is Maria, and for years I struggled with limerence and I didn't even know it. But it's hard to fight a beast when you don't know the name. Everyone knows what drugs are, but who the heck knows what limerence is? Well, if you can't stop obsessive thoughts over this one person who, if they just loved you, it would fix everything in your life and you would finally be happy, you might be struggling with limerence. Limerence is a monster that can be relentless, and the obsessive thoughts are intrusive and they seem like they are completely uncontrollable. But you can stop it. So if you are tired of obsessing over someone else and you are ready to begin to win the battle against limerence, then grab a bottle of nail polish and let's talk. Limerence thrives in relationships that are limited. Relationships like long distance, friends with benefits, situationships, anxious avoidant dynamics. These are the kinds of relationships that have huge gaps in them where limerence can grow and thrive. We fill these gaps with limerent fantasies of what the relationship could look like if only the other person would fill in the blank. And that's exactly what our brain does. It fills in the blanks and it fills us with the dopamine thinking about how great the relationship could be instead of allowing us to see the relationship for what it really is. And oftentimes it's a pretty lonely, one-sided relationship. But limerence doesn't just thrive to fill empty gaps in relationships. Limerence can help you fill empty gaps in your life. And as I said before, people tend to fill lifestyle and emotional gaps with drugs or focusing too much on other people. Basically, they fill it in with an addiction. Now, I'm someone who personally struggled with substances in the past, and I was able to overcome the addiction. And when I finally learned what limerence was, and that it is an addictive thought pattern, I was like, oh, because once you put a name on it, once you realize what it is, that's when you can start fighting it. I thought back to one of the most interesting TED Talks I had ever seen on how to move past an addiction. I'll put the link to the full video down below, but I hope you guys will stay with me, and I hope the information will also help you grasp how to get a handle on limerence if you struggle with limerent and obsessive thoughts about someone else. Early in the 20th century, scientists were doing experiments with rats to prove how bad and addictive drugs are. They would take a rat, put it in an empty cage with 2 water bottles. One water bottle would have water, and the other bottle would be laced with. Now, as soon as the rat discovered the water bottle with the drugs in it, it would go back and back and back and obsessively consume it until it was dead. And the scientists were very satisfied with this result because they felt that it proved their point. Look how bad drugs are. Look how addictive they are. The rat could not stop taking the drug, even to its own demise. However, in the 1970s, a man named Professor Alexander comes along, observes the experiment, and he notices that there is something missing. He said, "You guys are putting this rat in an empty cage. There's nothing else for this rat to do except take the drugs." So Professor Alexander built a cage that he called Rat Park. It was basically heaven for rats. It had loads of cheese, tons of colorful toys, and plenty of other rat friends for the rat to play with. Those rats still had access to the drug water, but interestingly enough, none of them took it. They either didn't consume the drugs at all, or at least they didn't do it compulsively, and there were no overdoses from it. This study found that a rat who was put in an empty cage would consume a poison that was providing it dopamine, and it would do it to his own detriment. But the rat would stay away from the poison when it knew it had an alternative lifestyle, it had lots of things to do, lots of fun hobbies, and other living creatures that it was connected to. If you find yourself obsessively going back and back and back to someone who is treating you poorly and killing you on the inside, or you keep going back to that good hit off that limerent fantasy of this one person who could finally fix everything and make your life happy, chances are you are living in what you perceive as an empty cage. Now, I don't mean that in an offensive way. I'm not calling your life meaningless. I mean, I certainly never thought my life was meaningless, but I can tell you that I was the most susceptible to slipping into limerence when my chips were down. In one of my saddest bouts of limerence, I was in a man's life who was always pushing me away and keeping me at arm's length. I had this glorious limerent fantasy that someday he'd realize we were perfect for each other and we'd always be up in a hot air balloon exploring the world together. It was a beautiful fantasy. And it was a fantasy because in reality, he was never there for me when I needed him, and he ignored my text messages whenever it was convenient for him. I mean, really believing that someday I was going to travel the world with a man who ignored my text messages whenever he felt like it, you can see how detached from reality I truly had gotten. In reality, My life wasn't doing so good. I wasn't taking very good care of myself. I wasn't feeling so hot. I was broke and I was lost in a limerent fantasy, and it kept me hooked because that's what addiction does. It keeps you completely hooked on the thing that you feel makes you feel better in the moment. It's that cheap hit. I didn't have a lot going for me, but I wasn't really working towards anything either. Well, except desperately trying to make this one broken relationship work. I thought I needed their love to validate me, to come into my life, rescue me, and it would fix everything. I needed my obsession with him to distract me from my empty cage. If you are hyper-focusing on someone else and why they won't do this, and if they could just do this, I'm asking you today, consider your cage. Can you bear to be present in your own life? Because if you don't like hanging out in the reality of your life, why would somebody else want to come join you? That's a really tough question to ask, but it's an important one. Step one, consider the cage. And then step two, get to work on it. Start filling your cage with hobbies and goals and friends. Create a space that you want to be in that's going to also be attractive for someone else to come in with you. Now, I know when we are really preoccupied with a certain person and trying to pull them into our life, it is tempting to take the easy way out. It's tempting to make it appear like we have a very full life. I know that there are people online who give people the advice to, it's ridiculous even after you get dumped, to blast yourself all over social media and show the person who doesn't want to be with you that you're a rock star and you're having the time of your life. It's fake. Well, you know what I say to that? Welcome to the other half, where we know attraction is not just about looks, because it doesn't matter how many pretty shiny photos you blast all over social media if what's on the inside, if what's behind all of those false images is empty and lonely. You're not fooling anybody. You have to do the hard work. Consider the cage. Evaluate what you can do to be more interested in your own life, and then do something about it. You defeat limerence by not leaving room for it. You make your life so full and interesting that the next time someone comes along and offers you the bare minimum and offers you their brand of toxic, poisonous relationship BS, you don't have time for it. No, thank you. Because now your life feels better than any cheap hit of fake validation that someone else can offer you. You're giving it to yourself. You've built it for yourself. You've done the hard work, and you have turned your lonely, empty cage into a beautiful music box by ILNP. My name is Maria Adriana. You did not have to live my life, but I certainly hope you can learn something from it. As always, thank you for visiting The Other Half.